Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 532, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 2. How disregard sets the stage for the second great war of your mind. The podcast objectives are restate the grave danger of the deception of eternal security, reveal how deception gains control over your will, analyze what happens when you resist the Tehuda of Yahushua Messiah, and analyze the first battle in the second great war of your mind. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us, for these are troubling times and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. You have to keep growing. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 491 of our exposition of lawlessness. Last week, we began analyzing the path ignorance and deception must follow to gain control over your will, to keep you in a perpetual state of backsliding with regards to the will of Elohim. Along these lines, we came to see how there is no clear path that ignorance and deception can follow. And yet, there is a path, but it would require them to blaze a hole through your mind and your heart, both of which have been regulated. Now, as you have learned, there are 64 degrees of lawlessness that cannot penetrate a regulated mind or a regulated heart. And yet, the 16 deadliest degrees of lawlessness can, which puts everything into perspective. My dear friends, I have warned you about the deception of eternal security. And now I am warning you again. It is deeper and more sophisticated than most think. Consider the following interest point, and I believe you will agree. There are multiple layers to the deception of eternal security, and the majority of them are designed to deceive those of us who are in the way of holiness from walking in the fear of Elohim. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. To wit, the spiritually mixed multitude, which accounts for more than 80% of all the false believers across the world, is only being infected with a small fraction of the deception of eternal security. Therefore, the vast majority of the deceptions that promote eternal security are being aimed at us, men and women who have been girded with truth and are walking in the fear of Elohim. Fascinating. And thus, the Ruach is leading me to touch on this matter because the deception of eternal security is a primary driver for complacency. To wit, the enemy wants you to get comfortable, for the man who seeks comfort is letting his guard down. And the man who lets his guard down is in danger of compromising the regulated environment he spent months, maybe years creating. My dear friends, if you are not careful, you will lose it all in one moment. As I say, it doesn't matter how high you ascend in your quest for holiness, you have to keep moving. You have to keep growing. And at this interval in our quest, that will require you to understand how ignorance and deception work together to reclaim dominion in your heart and your mind. And then you will see how the knowledge of Elohim will defeat them and keep you from backsliding and from becoming blind. Let's get started. Where there is no regulation. Now, per the table below, it is clear the first phase in the second great war of your mind involves disregard and despair. Remember, to control your will, ignorance and deception must first control your mind. This is why I refer to this conflict as the second great war of your mind. For you have already won the first war. To wit, you have already defeated disobedience and doubt, and you are presently reigning over all their degrees. Notwithstanding, if you are deceived by any manner of eternal security, you are opening the door for complacency to re-enter. However, this time he is not coming into your mind alone. Quite the contrary, he has some friends he is bringing this time around. And the first of his new friends is disregard, the fundamental degree of ignorance. Let's talk about her. Now, first things first, disregard is powerful, but there are limits to her power as it pertains to your mind. To wit, her prime objective is to control your will. Ergo, she doesn't have the tools to deregulate your mind. And yet, she knows someone who does. Enter despair, a crook, and the first villain you defeated in your quest. Ergo, disregard will employ the services of despair to initiate the process of deregulation within your mind. For, as I said aforetime, where there is no regulation, there can be no resistance. And the only way deception can gain control over your will is if he can first drain you of every ounce of resistance you possess. And as hope is the foundation of your resistance, she is the prime target of disregard. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, if disregard can drain you of your hope, you will lose the foundation of your resistance. Now, that said, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: how does disregard drain you of all your hope? The answer is sure, and we have touched on it all throughout this series on ignorance and deception. Vis-a-vis, deception has awakened the spirit of complacency. And to understand the Implications of this awakening, we must revisit the impact of complacency within your mind. Let's get to work. Fighting multiple battles on multiple fronts. Now, we analyze the impact of all the degrees of disobedience and doubt during phase one. Along these lines, we analyzed the impact of complacency in End Times 368, How Disobedience Plagues the Mind, Part 5, which was posted on November 8th, 2024. We also analyzed your victories over complacency in End Times 384 and 385, your victory over complacency, Part 1 and 2, which were posted on December 13th and 16th, 2025. As I say, if you can find the time, you will be well served to re-engage these podcasts. Now, amongst other things, you will recall that complacency is the most prominent stronghold the enemy will ever establish within your mind. And now you know why. Vis-a-vis, as long as complacency is in play, disregard can open the door to your mind, and she will keep it open until all the degrees of ignorance and deception come in, after which the remaining 48 degrees of lawlessness will follow. Now, that's the bad news. And yet, there is good news, to wit, the fact that complacency is back in play does not mean he has reestablished his stronghold, for it takes time for the enemy to create a stronghold. However, if you've had a stronghold of complacency in the past, recreating one will not take as long as it did at the first. Not only this, but the fact that complacency is back in play has deadly implications. Get this. Complacency will work against your thought dimension on one end, while disregard and despair work on the other. My dear friends, this is a scenario we did not encounter in phase one. Vis-a-vis, as we followed the linear model of holiness, we were able to address lawlessness in the same linear fashion, which is why we had terrific success. But now we are entertaining a different scenario. Vis-a-vis, we are not following the linear model of holiness. Quite the contrary, we, my friends, are backsliding, which is forcing us to fight multiple battles with lawlessness on multiple fronts. Now, that said, the question of the hour is quite simply this: how can we possibly defeat lawlessness if we are not following the linear model of holiness? The answer is sure, and it is as dire as it is sure. To wit, there is no way to defeat lawlessness without following the linear model of holiness. For the linear model is the Tehuda of Yahushua Messiah. Vis-a-vis, it is the path he followed to reign victorious over lawlessness, sin, and death. This is why he declared, I am the way, the truth, and the life. For by following his example, we know that we are in the way, we are operating in the truth, and we shall have everlasting life. Hallelujah. A chain reaction of death in your mind. Now, I will speak to the next series of battles you must fight with complacency in the next podcast. For the more important battle is with the enemy you don't know. Enter disregard. As I said before, disregard is not looking to establish a stronghold within your mind. On the rather, she is looking to reinstate the stronghold of despair so that she can conquer a key actor within your mind. Enter your renewed personality. You can see this by observing the image to the right, which we analyzed during phase one. Vis-a-vis, despair is designed to conquer your personality. Here is why. Your personality is the primary governor of your mind. Ergo, by reinstating despair as the primary controller of your personality, disregard will set off a chain reaction of death within your thought dimension. We analyze these matters in End Times 333, How Doubt Plagues the Mind, Part 3, which was posted on September 4th, 2024. That said, I am sure you know what is coming. To wit, I am going to encourage you to go back into the archives and re-engage that podcast. As I say, we invested 159 podcasts laying a firm foundation for your quest. And now that we are building off that foundation, it is imperative that you familiarize yourself with your foundation. For we covered a lot of material in those days, and no one could retain it all. Trust me, I go back into the archives often, which is evidence that this knowledge did not come from me. My dear friends, I'm just a watchman and a messenger. This is why I create diagrams like the one you see to the right. And if you look at it closely, you will see how your personality feeds into your emotions and your physical perspective. Along these lines, despair is designed to A, distort your physical perspective, and B, manipulate your emotions to control your feelings. Here again, you can see this by the image to the right. All things considered, the image to the right represents your first go around with despair. Ergo, we need an updated image to account for the presence of disregard. And voila, there you have it, an updated diagram that shows you how disregard feeds into despair, which goes to war with your renewed personality to corrupt your emotions and your physical perspective. Now, that said, it should be clear that there are multiple new factors in this war that were not present in your first war with doubt. To wit, your renewed personality, which is fortified by hope. But alas, hope is not in this diagram, which brings us to the $1,000,000 question. Vis-a-vis, what happened to hope? To wit, why isn't she at her post? That, my friends, is the question, and it will help us solve an even greater mystery, which I will broach with the following revelation. This is one I advise you to bookmark if you are led. Prior to the arrival of disregard, despair could not challenge the power of hope and your renewed personality, which is after the Ruach of Elohim. But as soon as disregard showed up, despair gained the power to do something she could not do before. To wit, she eliminated hope, and now she is laying siege on your renewed personality. Here again, the $1,000,000 question is, how did she do it? The answer is sure, and since we are out of time, we will address it in the next podcast. Trust me, this will be a podcast you can't afford to miss, for we will thoroughly analyze the first war you will fight with lawlessness after unlocking the girdle of truth. And although there is no war you can afford to lose, this is a war you must win. And the only way you will win is if you know what you are up against. And so, here again, I will tell you what you are up against in 2 days. Yahuwah bless you until then. Now, here is the final word. Despair is a liar and a crook who desires to take back everything she took. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, it is true that disregard and complacency are the major players in this new war you are fighting within your mind. But despair will often prove to be the deadliest. My dear friends, there is a reason why I have constantly referred to despair as a crook, for she will take everything from you, your joy, your peace, everything you could possibly obtain in your quest for holiness. Despair is going to take it, which only increases the stakes of this battle. And my hope that you are going to make it. Along these lines, you must appreciate how despair in this scenario is primed to steal your knowledge and the perfect will of Elohim concerning you. For by teaming up with disregard and complacency, she will gain the power to make you blind to what is true. Heretofore, I recommend stay away from the path that leads you back into despair, for she will take you for everything you've got. And when Yahushua returns to find faith in the earth, you will be situated with those who have not. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 532, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 2. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 533, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 3. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, November 5th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.